Hey everybody, my name is Amanda and this is a new video series that I'm creating called Innocence Investigations. Basically, I work in the legal field. I became very interested in wrongful convictions and exonerations. I just kind of wanted to do a series that highlights those types of cases because I feel like they don't get the justice they deserve. So for the first case, I am going to be talking about one that is very close to home. It actually happened in the same county that I live in, and it's a huge ongoing case right now. And I'll start out with the victims in this case. The victim, Charisse Christopher, she was born on December 16th of 1958. She moved away from Tennessee. Her family was from Millington, Tennessee, which is a little bit north of Memphis. She met a man who would become her husband, Kenneth Christopher, and they got married on December 3rd of 1983. And in January 2nd of 1984, they welcomed their first child, a son named Nicholas Allen Christopher. In January 22nd of 1985, they welcomed a daughter named Lacie Jo Christopher. Soon after Lacie was born, later in 1985, Charisse decided she was going to leave her husband. He was very abusive mentally, emotionally, physically. So she moved back to Millington, Tennessee to be closer to her family. And she moved into the Hiawassee Apartments with her sister at the time. Her sister decided to work things out with her husband, so she moved out, leaving Charisse living in an apartment by herself with her two kids. And soon after, she filed for divorce from Kenneth. A few years later is when the crime we're going to talk about occurred. On June 22nd of 1987, Charisse Christopher and her two children, Nicholas, who was now 3 years old, and Lacie, who was now 2 years old, had spent the morning with her family just hanging out at her mom's house. And around 3 p.m., she brought the kids home. Soon after she put the kids down for a nap, an unknown male intruder entered the home. It is unknown whether he broke into the home or whether she let him in. It is said that the manager of the apartment, she actually lived underneath the Christopher family. They lived on the second floor. She heard Charisse Christopher scream and say, "Get out, get out." And then she heard it go silent, so she debated going upstairs to check it out, and she decided against it. So she called the police so they could go and check it out. When the police arrived about 10 minutes later, they walked into the apartment and they found Charisse Christopher with 42 stab wounds to her chest, neck, and head. And she also had 42 defensive wounds on her hands and her arms. Lacie Christopher had 9 stab wounds to her chest, back, and neck. And Nicholas Christopher also had multiple stab wounds. When the police arrived, Lacie and Charisse Christopher had already died from the injuries, but Nicholas Christopher was still breathing. So they rushed him to a local children's hospital where he underwent multiple surgeries. He lived through the attacks. A man by the name of Pervis Payne, who was said to be in the area at the time of the murders, was arrested and charged the same day with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault with intent to commit murder. Pervis Tyrone Payne was born on March 1st of 1967 in Drummond, Tennessee. He lived there with his father, who was a pastor, his mother, who opened a daycare, and 2 sisters. He struggled in school as a child. He was intellectually disabled. Back then, they didn't have the tests they have now or the help they have now. So he struggled throughout all 12 years of school. He finished the 12th grade. However, he couldn't pass a statewide exam, even though he took it 5 separate times. So he was unable to graduate. He helped his father out at his father's church, and he worked for a short period of time at the local Pizza Hut, but the manager said that he struggled with remembering how to make pizzas without looking at instructions or having someone show him, so he wasn't there for very long. After that, he was helping his father with his painting business, and he did that full time up until he was arrested for the murder of the Christophers. Since Pervis Payne was arrested in 1987, his story has remained the same about what happened the night or the day of the murders. He was going over to his girlfriend, Bobby Thomas's apartment, and she lived across the hall from Charisse Christopher. He says that he got there a little bit before 3 o'clock, and she wasn't home. She had traveled to Arkansas to visit family. So he waited outside the apartment for a little while, and then he had friends and family in the area, so he left and came back periodically. Around 3 p.m. when he arrived back at the apartment complex, he said that he passed a man on the stairwell, a black man wearing a beige Hawaiian shirt, and he had blood on his shirt, and the man was running down the stairs. So when the man dropped some change and paper out of his pocket, Pervis Payne thought that he would turn around to grab it. So when he turned around to look, the man was still running out the door. So Pervis bent down and picked it up to not leave litter on the ground of the complex. He said when he reached the second floor landing, he heard a baby crying and a woman saying help. And he noticed that Charisse Christopher's door was slightly ajar. So he walked over to the door and announced that he was there. He knocked, and he just kept hearing someone say help. So he told her that he was going to enter the apartment. When he entered the apartment, he found Charisse Christopher on the kitchen floor with a butcher knife in her neck. He said she was still alive, but she had her hand on the knife, and she was trying to pull it out. And he also saw Lacie Christopher on the ground of the kitchen and Nicholas Christopher as well. So he bent down to Charisse and said, "Don't worry, we're going to get you help. We're going to get you help." He says that when he realized what was happening around him, he ran over to the kitchen sink because he thought he was going to vomit. He saw the telephone next to the kitchen sink. So he grabbed the telephone and he told Charisse, "Don't worry, we're going to get you help." When he had the telephone in his hand, he couldn't remember what the emergency number was because he was in such a state of shock. So he put the phone back and he bent back down to where Charisse Christopher was laying. He said she was still trying to pull the knife out of her neck, so he wanted to help her. And he put his hands over hers and helped her pull the knife out. He says he cut his hand slightly when he did that. He told her not to worry, he was going to go get help. So he got up and he went over to the little boy who was crying, Nicholas Christopher, and he told him, don't cry, it's going to be okay, I'm going to get help." So when he was walking out of the apartment to go knock on neighbors' doors to try and get help, he saw the police car pull up and a white cop get out. When that happened, it suddenly occurred to him that if the cop walked up and saw him with blood on his clothes from bending down to help, black man in a white woman's apartment, and they're dying from stab wounds, that he would most likely be implicated in the murder. So he panicked and he ran from the scene. At Pervis Payne's trial, the prosecution told a complete different story of what they believed the events of the day were. The Millington police officer, who was first on the scene, stated that when he walked up to the apartment building, he saw Pervis Payne standing on the second floor landing, and he allegedly ran down the stairs to get away from the officer and hit the officer with an overnight bag on his way down. The officer pursued him but was unable to catch him, so he went back to the apartment complex. That's when he discovered the Christophers, Charisse and Lacie, had died at the scene, and Nicholas was taken to the local hospital. There was no DNA testing at the time of Pervis Payne's trial. Pervis Payne's fingerprints were found on the kitchen sink as well as the telephone in the kitchen. There are pieces of evidence that to this day have never been tested for DNA. They include the murder weapon, bloody clothing from the victims and from Mr. Payne from the day of the attacks, curtains from the kitchen as well as a tablecloth, women's glasses, vaginal swabs from Charisse Christopher, as well as fingernail scrapings from all of the victims. Pervis Payne was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death on both first-degree murder charges and an additional 30 years for the assault charge on Nicholas Christopher. There was only one eyewitness to the crime, a neighbor named Mr. Williams, and he has provided multiple sworn affidavits regarding the events of that day. He stated that he saw Pervis Payne enter the front of the apartment complex, and a few minutes later, he saw another black man that was not Pervis Payne with blood on his shirt. He ran out the front door, got in his car, and drove away. And then several minutes after that, he saw Pervis Payne run from the complex. Mr. Williams stated that the unidentified black man that ran out of the building first, he had seen come out of the apartment complex with Charisse Christopher on multiple occasions. He also stated that Charisse sold cocaine out of her apartment complex as well as used cocaine. And he stated that he had also bought cocaine from her at the apartments as well as used with her. Mr. Williams also stated that he had spoken to a local drug dealer in town, and he had told Mr. Williams that Charisse as well as another woman in the apartment complex were selling drugs out of the apartments for him. It has been said that Charisse had stole drugs and money from the drug dealer, and both the drug dealer and his partner were heard saying, and I quote, "We need to take care of the Christopher woman." And it was also stated that after they learned about Pervis Payne's arrest, they said Pervis Payne was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. The victim, Charisse Christopher, was found with methamphetamine and amphetamine in her system at the time of her death. And Pervis Payne was never known to use drugs, despite the prosecution during his trial stating that his motive for killing Miss Christopher was that he was drinking, injecting cocaine, and wanted sex. And when she wouldn't give it to him, he allegedly stabbed her over 80 times, along with her 2 children. However, the sworn testimony from Mr. Williams shows that there may be another person out there with a motive to kill her. Another possible suspect that was never looked into was Miss Christopher's husband, Kenneth Christopher. At the time of the murders, he was in jail for assault, and it is speculated that it was against Miss Christopher. An employee at the prison that he was in at the time of the murders has now come out and given a sworn statement stating that at the time the murders occurred, prisoners, being that it was a minimum security prison, they were let out during the day for work, or if something at home happened and they wanted to leave for the day, they would normally have a family member pick them up down the street. As long as they returned by the end of the day, they wouldn't be in trouble. So she has stated that it is possible that Kenneth Christopher could have left the prison that morning for his work duty, went to Charisse Christopher's apartment, killed her, and returned back in time. However, with 2 eyewitness statements saying that it was an unknown black man, It's unlikely that it was Mr. Christopher, but that's still a suspect that was never looked into. The police officers who were investigating at the time stated that Kenneth Christopher's in prison, so we don't need to look at him, but the employees of the prison said they were never questioned about whether the prisoners were monitored. There are multiple inconsistent theories with what happened that night regarding Mr. Payne. As I stated before, it was said that he was on drugs and drinking and tried to have sex with Miss Christopher, and she denied him. However, he has never had a history of drug use, and he was never in trouble with the law as a juvenile or an adult. His teachers at school have given sworn statements stating that he was one of the nicest guys, and he never got in trouble at school either. When his family heard about his arrest, his mother went to the police station. There had been rumors going around town that maybe he had done drugs or maybe he was crazy. So his mother went and asked for the officers to drug test him. However, the officer stated that there was no reason to drug test him because there was no suspicion of him using drugs at the time of the murders. And in the 6-page police report, there was no mention of him seeming like he was on drugs or drug paraphernalia being found. It was actually the day before his trial began when the prosecutors decided that that was the motive that they were going to use in trial. Another inconsistency in the case is the fact that there was blood that went up the walls and the doors because this was a very brutal attack. There was blood all over the kitchen. However, Pervis Payne only had blood on his clothing from when he kneeled down. There was blood on his pants from kneeling down on the floor. And he stated that when he bent down to help Miss Christopher pull the knife out, she grabbed onto his shirt and pulled him close to her and left blood on his shirt. However, it's been stated that judging by the amount of blood in the kitchen, the person who committed the crime would have had more than just a small amount of blood on their pants and their shirt. After the trial, where they found Pervis Payne guilty of murder, his attorneys appealed it in 1988. That appeal was denied. In January of 1992, his attorneys filed a petition for post-conviction relief. That was also denied, and they appealed that petition. However, in October of 1996, the appeals trial court also denied the appeal, and they affirmed what the court had already stated. In January of 1997, there was a petition for writ of error filed in his case. That was also denied. In 2005, Mr. Payne's mother, Bernice Payne, died as a result of cancer at the age of 64. In September of 2006, Mr. Payne's attorneys filed a petition for DNA analysis on the crime scene evidence. In March 2007, that appeal was denied and again affirmed by the Court of Appeals. In 2016, Pervis Payne's oldest sister passed away unexpectedly. In February of 2020, the state applied for an execution date for Mr. Payne, and he was given the execution date of December 3rd of 2020. In July of this year, his attorneys filed a 61-page petition for post-conviction DNA analysis. In the petition, his defense attorney stated that in December of 2019, one of the investigators was in the evidence locker looking at the evidence from the case again, and he discovered a bloody comforter, bloody sheets, and a bloody pillow that belonged to the case but had never been turned over to his defense team. On July 30th, the district attorney of Shelby County, Amy Wyrich, stated that the additional evidence that was found in the evidence locker was mistakenly labeled with the Pervis Payne case, but it was actually evidence from a crime that happened decades later. And she also stated that they should not do the DNA analysis on any of the evidence from the crime scene, because she believed that based on what the jury heard in trial, the DNA analysis wouldn't make a difference in the outcome of his case. On September 16th of this year, Judge Paula Skane ruled that she would allow testing on the evidence from the Pervis Payne case, and that it would take 60 days to complete. The results from the DNA testing are expected to be back mid-November, which is next month, and then his execution date is scheduled for December 3rd. On October 5th, Pervis Payne's defense attorneys requested clemency from the governor of Tennessee, Governor Bill Lee. As of today, there has been no response to that. However, I am going to link the address in the description box if you would like to write a letter to Governor Bill Lee saying that Mr. Payne's execution date is coming up soon, and there's been a lot that has gone wrong in this case, a lot that they have failed to do in this case. Being that I live in the same area where this crime occurred, I have reached out to both families for comments. The Innocence Project is now working on Mr. Payne's case, so his family had to get permission through them before they could speak with me. And I have not heard back from Mr. Christopher. However, I do plan on doing an update video when the DNA test results come back next month. So hopefully in the meantime, I will be able to speak to some of the family and get better insight into what they've gone through because of this crime. So I will leave a petition that you can also sign, and there's a place where you can leave a note to Mr. Payne, and the Innocence Project delivers those to him in prison. Let me know in the comments below what your opinion is of the Payne case, whether you think he is innocent or guilty, and if there is another case of a wrongful conviction or an exoneration that you would like for me to feature on my channel. Also leave that below, because I would like to do videos that you want to see as well. So hopefully when I do the update video, I will have some more information for you. And until then, let me know what you guys think. Bye.